Welcome back to Pod Team Epic. As always, I'm your host Ramiz, and I decided to record this special little podcast by myself just to talk about one series that, over the last few months, especially with its second season, has come to mean a lot to me and become one of my absolute favourite shows, in hopes of maybe convincing even one person to watch it. And, if you can't guess from the title, I'm talking about Mob Psycho 100. This will be spoiler free aside from talking about like the basic premise and themes of the series and some vague thematic references, nothing too serious, so it really shouldn't ruin anyone's enjoyment of it. So I already talked about how Mob Psycho 100 inspires me to be a better person in episode 3 of our podcast, which you can listen to YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this really. But I think I want to talk about it just a bit more because I know not a lot of people want to sit through an hour and 15-minute podcast. But first, I'll start by introducing the series for anyone who isn't really familiar with it. Mob Psycho 100 was originally written by One, the same mangaka or manga artist behind One Punch Man, and follows a middle school boy, Shigeo Mob Kageyama, his life living with his psychic powers. He's an incredibly powerful psychic, yet he keeps this fact a secret from most people, and he has to keep his emotions in check, because if he gets too emotional, his psychic powers quote-unquote explode, and he can end up unintentionally hurting those around him. That's the most basic premise of the show. That's what you'll see on a website describing the plot. But the show has some really strong, major themes, and I would say the most prominent one of those, and the one that's really inspired me to record this episode especially, is that Mob Psycho says that nobody is born special. Mob has overwhelmingly powerful psychic abilities. They don't help him deal with the problems he faces in day-to-day life. They don't make him smarter or more athletic. They don't help him impress girls. They just don't really help him, live the life of a 14-year-old. He just wants to live his life normally, to be special and maybe make something of himself, but not using his psychic powers, but in spite of them. Despite his powers, he isn't special, and neither is anyone else in the show really. And the show really just tries to follows him just trying to become a better person every day, especially with the help of his mentor, a con man pretending to be a psychic, Arataka Reigen. The main conflicts of the series arise when the assertion that nobody is born special is contested. When someone childishly thinks that they're special because of their powers, Mob and Reigen put them in their place. Not by defeating them with their psychic abilities, even though that does happen, but usually by never abandoning their own philosophy. The show has inspired me to be a better person any chance I get, really. I'm not special because of the circumstances I was born into. I was lucky, I've been pretty privileged my entire life, but I'm not better than anyone. No characteristic about me makes me worth more than any other human. And it would be naive of me to say that anything in life can be achieved with enough hard work and determination, because simple fact of life is that no, it really can't. Not everyone has the same opportunities, not everyone can do the exact same things. But Mob Psycho still gives me that hope. It's a naive, almost childish hope, and it's pretty impressive that it manages to convince, me or anyone else really, that they can achieve whatever they want, and, maybe one day you'll reach your goals. And it still even says, if you don't, that's okay too. To quote the second opening theme, your life is your own. Live it the way you want. Each of its 5 main characters, especially in the second season. Before, in the first season, it's more like 2-3 characters, but each of them only serve to advance this theme, and the most prominent of which are the main 2, Mob, who I've already talked about a bit, and Reigen. Reigen's a con man, plain and simple. He pretends to be a psychic and he helps people with their problems involving alleged spirits, usually just by giving massages or solid life advice, just helping people with problems that don't really relate to spirits, but pretending they do. And despite his shady business practices, he really has a heart of gold, and that's made him one of my absolute favorite characters. At his core, he really just wants to help people, even if he wants to make a bit of money doing it. What's really special about him, though, is he's willing to change and grow, and does so. He does it throughout the series. He grows alongside Mob. Mob tries to improve himself every day, and Reigen is ultimately his example, and they both act as catalysts for each other's change. It's pretty rare that you see adult characters in any medium change in the way Reigen does, especially around the midway point of season 2. Mob Psycho isn't just a feel-good philosophical story either. it's pretty special in terms of its action. It's animated by Studio Bones and has some incredible art design and direction. There's so many strong visual flares and cues that there are times where there's so much going on you can't even notice every detail. From simple shifts in character design for comedic effect, to completely changing art styles when showing certain types of spirits and fights for emphasis. Bones really went all out. They spared no effort in bringing this series to life, even though, it's not based on the best looking source material. Not to mention, some of the fight scenes are just ridiculously good looking. Like, if you've seen the final fight scene from One Punch Man, that's pretty much the consistent quality of fights in Mob Psycho, and some of the scenes in season 2 of Mob Psycho especially just blow that One Punch Man fight out of the water. Character animation is, it's pretty vastly underappreciated in a lot of series. And for anyone that doesn't know, character animation is essentially the movement and how expressive characters are in terms of like facial expression and body movement. It isn't about how realistic their movements are, but how well they express the character's emotions and thoughts. And Mob Psycho just has some of the best character animation I've seen in a long time. So often the character designs will shift and contort, not only for comedic effect, which it does at times, but to really add emphasis to all the emotions, especially negative ones. The soundtrack's also phenomenal. So many of the insert songs really bring the scenes to life, and some of them are downright tear-inducing when, introduced at the right moment. Not to mention, both openings and endings, bangers. End of the day, when it comes down to it, if you want a series with heart, a series where the characters are relatable and never stagnant, a series that is truly inspirational, or if you liked One Punch Man and you're looking for something that's better in pretty much every way, you should watch Mob Psycho 100. If you need a little bit more convincing, I'd recommend watching the scene where Mob and Reigen first meet on the Crunchyroll Collection YouTube channel specifically. Avoid spoilers. It is from season 2, but it only spoils a little bit about Reigen's character development, if you're interested. Or if you've got some time, there's a fantastic YouTuber by the name of Super Eye Patchwolf, whose video on why you should watch Mob Psycho goes into a lot more detail than this, but it's over 20 minutes long, and honestly I would just recommend watching the first episode if you have enough time to watch that video. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I really hope I've convinced anyone to watch Mob Psycho 100 if you haven't already.